From our origination, diversity, equity, and inclusion was a core part of our strategy, and we've even made it more core. Leadership for Educational Equity, LEAD for short, is a leadership development organization. The problem that we see today is that not all kids in the United States have access and opportunity to have a great education. We believe part of the problem is actually the laws and the policies themselves are not equitable, and we believe that we need to have more leaders with equity mindset and more leaders representing communities that are impacted to be at the decision-making tables as elected officials, policy and advocacy leaders, and as the community itself. So when that becomes our core mission, that means DEI, diversity, equity, and inclusion is core to our work, both in terms of the way that we want to work with our members in terms of instilling equity mindset, and also making sure more of our members represent the communities impacted. And when we do that work with members, we need to make sure that we're doing that work with our staff at all levels of the organization. We represent the communities, and that we are also building that muscle, DEI muscle in our staff to be able to work across lines of difference within ourselves and with members.
My work is in creating transformational experiences so that we can create equity-minded leaders. We support our members in identifying how they can make sure to interrupt oppression in the institutions that they run. We ask them to think deeply about whether or not they're engaging marginalized communities, and we support them in taking strategic risks. We know that it's particularly important to be vulnerable and take risks as well if you're going to create equitable and inclusive institutions. We found that it's particularly important for our staff to be able to lead in equitable and inclusive ways, especially if we're having that same expectation for our members, because our staff, of course, are the folks who are implementing the programs for our members.
From our diversity and equity and inclusion perspective, we're looking about it across the organization, but clearly there's a specific focus on senior leaders because we are leading the organization. And for us, that has shown up in a variety of different ways. Number one, we've been committed to make sure that our senior leadership itself is diverse. So today we have 50% of our leadership team are staff of color, and 50% of our leadership team is female. But in addition, we know that the diversity, equity, and inclusion journey is a journey, and it's that one taking both individually and collectively. And so in the last 2 years, as we've delved into it, we've realized that we need to provide coaching to our senior leaders on how to show up and lead in our own organization and across. Part of the work that I was working around is how do I lift up the leadership of my own team? And so a lot of the self-reflection came around how do I ask the right questions versus leaning in with the answers, and ask the right questions to lift up the leadership of the team across levels, but also within within the leadership of the team itself. And the second place where it showed up was, look, bad things happen and breaches happen. So how to own up to it, how to create inclusive spaces, how to be comfortable with discomfort and not knowing, and to sort of work through the problems together. This is still an area I'm learning, but that is one way that we have done it on senior management. As an impact and results-driven organization, we care a lot about data, and we have made sure from the very get-go, but especially in the last 2.5 years, that everything that is important to us, we are measuring and we're setting goals around, and not only at the org level, but at the department level, and then at the individual level to the way that it makes sense, so that everybody is making, back to that question, to the point about diversity needs to be at the core. So what does data and diversity at the core mean for each individual? That means that they need to have both either member-facing goals or organizational goals around diversity, equity, and that's one way that we're measuring.
Our staff are folks who do things like facilitate workshop experiences, provide leadership development coaching and career coaching as well. So it's absolutely essential that our staff understand their own identities and experiences as they're implementing these kinds of programs, coaching, supporting members in running for office, all of those things, because we know that all of us, we bring our biases into work, and we all have biases. So we have to be aware of what we're bringing with us so that we can make sure that we are creating something different when we're supporting members and taking their next steps.